Hello, thank you for joining us with this opening celebration of our newest exhibit at Texas Folklife. This is an exhibit of quilts about African American suffragettes' contribution to the 19th Amendment and to voting rights even up to today. And I have with me today the two co-curators of this exhibit, Tomasita Louviere-Ligons and her co-curator, Sharon Mooney. And they're going to talk to us a little bit about who they are, who the quilters are, and what their process was as they chose the quilters and the quilts to be included in this very interesting and timely exhibit. So I'm going to let them take it from here. Then first of all, we'll have Tomasita.
Becky, thank you. And thank you to Texas Folklife for sponsoring our exhibit. We do think it's very important. It's about the African American suffragettes that influenced the ratification of the 19th Amendment. But as we know and have found out through the course of time, that these women, the African American women, were not documented in the record, but I think that there's been a lot of effort going on to make a correction or an addendum to that record. So Sharon and I want to introduce Sharon. Sharon is my co-curator, but also my friend and fellow quilter. I think Sharon has a whole lot more experience in quilting than I do, but I think she would probably say the same about me. So we're just, we just admire each other's skill in quilting. And anyway, Sharon, what do you think about the exhibit that we've curated?
I think the exhibit, of course, I think it's awesome. And I also want to thank you, Becky, and Texas Folklife and everyone who worked so hard to get this exhibit out there, especially during these trying times. And especially thank you to Tomasita. I think when we first started talking about the exhibit, I was thinking about it in the back of my mind, but Tomasita had the courage to say, Sharon, do you want to do an exhibit that explains the African American experience? And I was like, oh my goodness, I cannot believe that you were thinking the same thing I am. And we kept seeing other exhibits that were popping up, and none of them were focusing on the African Americans who I feel as an African American and throughout history has shown us have a unique and powerful history and has in many times had to struggle through inequalities and injustices to get the same rights. So I'm excited about the exhibit and what it will show.
And that's true. Sharon was thinking about it and I said it, and she was just so surprised, like, oh, that's the same thing that I'm thinking. And so I'm not going to say we, I think Sharon had already got together a list of women that she was thinking. I think she was just putting it down on paper. I just blurted it out. But we got together a list of suffragettes or African American women, basically, that we felt was part of this impact upon the ratification of the 19th Amendment from the beginning of time. So like with the Seneca Falls, basically the fight for women's rights and the right to vote took almost 100 years. It was 100 years in the making. So it started out like at Seneca Falls with, I believe it was Elizabeth Cady Stanton Cady, and Susan B. Anthony had organized the convention there. But again, Sojourner Truth was a speaker there, but as we know, Sojourner Truth was not credited as a suffragette that helped in the fight for women's right to vote. So we got together a group of friends. I think when we first started, we had grander ideas of putting out a call for quilt making. We went around town, looked at a couple of the libraries and the Carver Museum. I knew that I would ask you, Texas Folklife, Becky, but we were just looking at sites in areas. We thought that it would be bigger because we had a very long list. But as time went on, but we still wanted to do it, we got together a group of friends that we knew could produce on a very short timeline and the quality that we thought we would want in the quilts. So we asked our friends to participate with us, and we selected names that we were interested in from the list, and the rest is history. So Sharon, I think you started from the beginning with your quilts, right?
I did, because once we started our research, I think the epiphany, if I can call it that, was that once the 19th Amendment was ratified, there was this big gap of time until the civil rights movement, and African Americans really got the right to vote without a struggle. And I called a couple of history professors that I knew, and I was like, what am I missing here? There's this 50-year gap. What happened? And it was just the same struggle. And after I found that out, I really felt like it was really, really important then that the African American story, the suffragettes that also struggled along with others to achieve the 19th Amendment, the right to vote, were highlighted, because it was just a powerful awakening for me. It was things that I had heard about as a child, but never really knew the meaning of, because it's not taught as widely in history books.
Right. Well, I couldn't, in my mind, I was like, is that true? Women got the right to vote. So I was like, maybe I was missing something as well, because I remember every time, the poll opened, there was a mad scramble to find the poll tax. And well, what is a poll tax? But it just didn't set in my mind that was really what we were celebrating, is the right for women to vote, when I knew that my mother had to pay and show a poll tax. So I have the same type of, wonder about how all of that matched up. But then you took it further. You took it into the different laws that were on the books, from the 13th Amendment all the way 14, 15, and 19, that, you had to keep saying it over and over. You have the right to vote. You have the right to vote. But I really like how you just outlined all the books, but the laws that were on the books that were not being enforced, basically.
And it's important to note that even though African Americans were able to pay the poll tax and votes, there were still areas in the United States where African Americans could not vote because of other struggles that were going on, because of, and people were fighting that. And it's so important that these people are highlighted, because there are so many people who died for this right that we will never know their names and the struggle that they went through. So I just really appreciate it. And I have to also thank Tomasita, because even though I feel like I was more instrumental in the original, Tomasita took this and ran with it. She was determined to make this happen. So I really appreciate that.
Right. So once we got all the quilts together, I wanted to basically kind of tell a story with all the suffragettes that we did get, because again, there are a lot of women that participated that are not included in our exhibit, but they are still equally important. And I remember that when Ancestry.com did, their commercials about the 19th Amendment celebration that was going to be coming up, there were pictures of African American suffragettes, but I didn't know their names. So, some of the research that I found out did have some of the women that we had on our list and who they were, but um, they're, they're not in our record, but they're just as important. Like um, Harper, Frances Harper, and Mary McLeod Bethune. I mean, just a whole list of women that we had that are not on the list. But then after, the right to vote, there were still the barriers and struggles that, continued on. And so, the marching and the organization of the women's clubs, suffrage clubs for African American women's participation in civic matters, to get out the vote and all of those types of things. So the quilts that we did have are kind of organized, telling the story, going all the way through with, Angela Davis and her activism for, the right to vote, and Fannie Lou Hamer and, all of her activities for the right to vote in the South. And, even today, even though, we did get the right to vote in 19, or fully enfranchised in 1965, but still going through voter suppression issues for women and the poor even today. And so, our final quilt outlines Stacey Abrams and, her activities that we're still continuing.
I love the way that this show is organized by the history and starting with the laws and ending with Stacey Abrams, who is again working to continue access to the polls for everyone. So I wish that I'm glad that we have the opportunity to show this exhibit virtually. I hope in the future that we will be able to hang the quilts actually on the walls, and people will be able to come in and view the quilts in the best light, and to see the incredible work that's been done to create these quilts. And I totally appreciate all the artists, their research into the subject and their thoughts about how it impacts them. I think that adds a whole nother level to viewing this exhibit virtually, to be able to hear the artist's voice and how making the quilts impacted them. So I want to thank you all both for spending the time to talk a little bit about about the exhibit, about the process, and it's congratulations to both of you for a job really well done. And I encourage everyone who views this interview and views the exhibit to please share it with all your friends. It's definitely an exhibit that is a feast for the eyes, but also for your mind to learn a little bit about perhaps a subject that you don't know a lot about. I definitely have learned a lot in it as I put this together. So thanks again for being with us.
Thank you.
Becky.